Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. My name is Jessica Locker-Feldman. I am the Exhibits and Special Projects Manager at the University of Rochester's River Campus Libraries. I'm also the curator of record of the AIDS Education Posters Collection, which is housed at the River Campus Libraries, not to be confused with the magnificent exhibition that many of us have worked on for, I think, about 6 years to get to where we are today. I hope that everyone does get a chance, if you haven't seen the exhibition Up Against the Wall, Art, Activism, and the AIDS Poster, that you will get some time to do that and bring people back and experience that together. It's been a remarkable journey to work on this project and to work so closely with so many people, both at the MAG and the libraries and within the community and beyond on this incredible journey. The exhibition took about 6 years to come to where we are today. It's been an absolute joy to work on and tainted, I think, with a lot of emotion in bringing something so powerful, so meaningful, and so deep in feeling and action and humanity as this exhibition is. It's really been a life-changing experience for me to work on it and to work on the collection. Please know that in addition to all the posters that are there, every single poster in the collection has been digitized and made available online for your use. So I hope that folks will take advantage of the incredible research and creative projects, artistic projects, writing projects, thinking and experiencing that can go along with this incredible collection. I find myself saying things and recognizing that it both sounds trite, but it is absolutely true that AIDS affects everyone, and that this exhibition, this collection, the AIDS crisis is a reflection of humanity and humanity's struggle against something so devastating and so complex, and reacting to it in so many different and important ways. And I think that part of the reason why it's been so moving to me is to have the individual experiences that I've had with folks in different ways over time, in thinking about how AIDS has affected individuals, how it has affected me in my life, and to see the beauty and the power of overcoming and fighting for things that really mean something. So with that, I am absolutely honored and thrilled to introduce our speakers tonight. Our program, Art Meets Science, is both informed by curiosity and close observation. How do they enrich and enhance each other, and what can an artist learn from being embedded in an academic health center, and what can a scientist learn from working closely with an artist? Charmaine Wheatley and Steve Dewhurst will discuss how a lifetime artist in residence at Boston's Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum came to find herself at URMC. They will also speak to the innovative use of curiosity, close listening, and observation, and the narrative portraiture as vehicles that spark humanizing dialogue and understanding. Art that destigmatizes by humanizing. So I'm going to introduce our two guests tonight, and we did not have a memo that circulated about wearing red-ish awesomeness, but I think that Stephen wins the prize for the most fantastic outfit I've ever seen in my life. So it's amazing. So Charmaine Wheatley is a visual artist whose work is held at international museum and library collections, including New York's Museum of Modern Art, and she has received numerous awards and honors and is a lifetime artist in residence at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. You could ask me who Isabella Beecher Hooker is later. Her current work involves sitting with people from stigmatized communities, including those affected with mental health, HIV, and opioid use disorder. She is presently the artist in residence at the Golisano Childrens Hospital at Strong. And Dr. Stephen Dewhurst is the University of Rochester's interim vice president for research and vice dean for research at the UR School of Medicine and Dentistry. He has worked on HIV since 1984 and co-directs the UR's HIV Clinical Trials Unit, which conducts HIV vaccine and treatment trials and engages with communities affected by HIV. He was instrumental in Wheatley's joining the U of R in 2017 and in developing a project to address the stigma associated with HIV. So with that, any further ado, I want to welcome Stephen and Charmaine to the stage and enjoy.
Where do you think we should stand? Can you hear us? Check, check.
Yes, we should check that first.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to grab the clicker. So I guess if you have questions or anything seems weird while we're talking,
in the way.
interrupt us. That's kind of the idea. Don't wait till the end. And I think we're going to start with just sort of explaining a bit how this project got started, because it's probably a bit of a strange thing to some or most or all of you. So this is one that I've been told I need to go past this slide quickly because there's an image here that our friends on Facebook won't enjoy. But this is from, that's from an exhibit of Charmaine's that was in Boston at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in 2016. So what you probably saw is something very much like this. So it's narrative portraiture, right? These are the words of somebody that are on the watercolor and recordings from a conversation. It was that kind of got my attention. And so originally I wanted to know, did Charmaine do any paintings of people affected by mental health diagnoses? And that's a personal interest of mine. My son has bipolar. And you'll see his image in a sec. But in sort of sparking that conversation, it led to a sort of subsequent conversation about, well, what about just this work and how one could use it in a medical environment to really allow people to express themselves and have them become very human. So I'm going to...
I want to do a...
Yep.
Sorry. I want to do a shout out to Carly. She might be watching. I was messaging with her that this drawing means a lot. She used to be in the Human Resources Department at the Gardner Museum. And I just love that somebody in the Gardner Museum Human Resources would share so openly without,
So part of this kind of, there's a lot of humor in this, and there's also a lot of trust and openness in sharing, that's not the kind of thing you just sort of randomly schlep out with while you just met somebody, right? So there's something that brought that out. So yeah, hi to Carly if you are watching.
Yeah, thank you.
So this is sort of a little the same, the sense of humor. This is a different work. And so this one is, Charmaine has a habit of, if there's paper around, you use it. So like napkins, or in this case, this is, as you can see, right, she usually uses quality paper. This is quality paper, right? This is like, it says somewhere on it, right?
But it's display, it's a sample paper. You're not supposed to actually draw on it. It's just to demonstrate that it is good quality paper. Yeah.
And then you see again, like the writing around the edge, and it's just mostly the sense of humor. And then, yeah, like 400-pound paper would be.
It was a burlesque show. Yeah, anyway.
So this then sort of, that's where I asked this question about portraits of folks affected by mental health diagnoses. This is my son, Gabe. This is a couple of years ago, it's 2017. And so this pulls out a variety of things from a conversation. And you'll see this, we'll go through some other portraits, right? But it's sort of, there's pieces of what shows up here, right? It's not an attempt to record every detail of this conversation.
That's impossible.
The things that...
Things that are noteworthy, things that are special, things that I want to remember or go back to. And I mean, that's the thing about when we were talking, I always just, my process is to just make notes of interesting things, which is everything, and it's quite overwhelming. And so I've done, I guess, maybe 200 portraits are on display for several years now, I don't know how many years, at the Gardner. And so now it's like applying that process for good, not evil, or whatever. Like before it was just like everything is cool, but then it's just like under the umbrella of HIV or under the umbrella of mental illness and the process. I think my sitter feels like they exist, and there's no judgment, and there's no objective, and you're not, a study, you're not a participant, you're in a research study, I'm not your therapist, we're strangers, and all we have is this hour we sit together and I do your portrait, and afterwards we're in love, and then there's this like little souvenir of that exchange.
And so then that so you have that first conversation about, well, maybe I'll come to the university, maybe I'll do something, and then it's like, well, just what exactly does that look like? Like, it's not a thing that at least I've ever done before, and it's not something, to my knowledge, the Med Center had done before, so it's like, well, where's the script for this? There isn't the script. And then the other thing is that you're working with very vulnerable people, right? So this is done under a consent. That's not necessary, but that's a choice to make. And that's partly so you can have a really frank discussion of, if you said, here's what it's going to play out like. And so that's very different than a medicalized consent.
When we do consents like at the museum for a portrait, it's like a page, it's like name, address, you're going to get your picture taken maybe, and the portrait you have no control. I don't even know if they say that. This is like 5 or 6 pages long. It's gone through lawyers and and then gone through again and revisited and then read, and it's constant. So it's good. It's good to be clear about what could happen.
So that's like the first thing that's really different than what you might do in, like if you were doing portrait in the mag, that just with a regular sitter, that would be different. Then the other thing that makes this work is like really good partners. So
Kathy Bunce, she's got all the grace and charm in the world, and she just gets things done without effort. Like, she does so much, but you'd never know that she was really busy. But without her, I wouldn't have. I just came into town, and I don't know anybody in the community. And Kathy was instrumental in introducing me to different organizations and then individuals and making those connections. And she's got well-established trust here in Rochester. Her background is in nursing, and for years. So it was very helpful that she was like, okay, it's okay. I've got you.
So that's sort of building trust, right? So Kathy works closely with the Victory Alliance and with the Clinical Trials Unit, so very much with communities affected by HIV as well as the LGBTQ community. And then thinking about who would sit, who are people who might enjoy sitting, who might really help advance that cause of dehumanizing. Of humanizing, destigmatizing. The other piece, which is sort of silly, but not silly, right? If you're in a med center, and you're an artist, right? So artists, visual artists, you need light, natural light. And if you're in a med center, there's not a lot of offices that have a bunch of natural light, plus office isn't big enough. You've got to have a studio with an easel and the whole bit. So finding somewhere, it's one of the conference rooms in my department that is not a conference room anymore, it's a studio. And so that's the studio, right? This is the door to the studio. You can see it used to be the conference room. So this is right it's actually one of the research buildings in the medical center. And shout out to Don in the audience. Right there, this is Don's movie, which was very much around this project and won a New York Emmy as Best Documentary Director, right, Don?
Yeah.
Yep. And Charmaine at the beach being the other picture there in the sunrise.
Mexico, actually, during COVID when you couldn't go anywhere. I did
But
that.
you did in fact go to Mexico.
No, I didn't. That was before. I just did the painting after.
And this is inside the studio.
Just some of the portraits. I mean, my process is, I'm talking too loud. I'm really sorry. Is it okay? Okay. I have this little watercolor set, and I used to use like a dollar store like watercolor set that somebody gave me, and then I've just upped my game since then. So these are schmanky watercolors, and as well I make my own with Kramer pigments, and so paint I spend money on, not so much on brushes. I have pens, and I have a box of paper, and it's very portable, very pocket. Instead of like, I think that's one of the cool things that we're going to get into is I do my portraits from life in public settings, and I think a lot of us think, oh, it's a big precious thing. If I don't have a fantastic studio with an easel and all that expensive tubes of paint and all of this time to just focus, then you can't. It's hard for artists who go to school, then they have to pay their rent and to make work. And so for me, it was born out of on the subway in New York City, like just, oh, there's an interesting person and I have do little tiny sketches, and just constantly there's a question.
So based on the scale, looking at that,
Yeah.
You're doing this on like really small paper?
Yeah, this is actually really big paper for me, but it's 4 inches by 7 3/8 of an inch. And
Yeah,
so,
no,
but
you're right. So this is a pen, right? This is just a little
yeah,
pen. So yeah.
so that is quite large.
So you get a sense of scale maybe
Yeah.
on. Well, this just emphasizes the schminky setup, but these are tiny little water bottles, right, that you carry around.
Oh yes, Sunrise Mart, Japanese, like for lunches, you can put soy sauce in them but it's perfect because up until I found those, I was like spitting on my brushes, that's not good, and licking them, and then always having to carry a bottle of water around, so this was a breakthrough, evolving one studio practice so that it fits with my life, not some idea of what my life should be based on what I've seen in a movie or something like that, like just keeping the flow kind of thing. That's a big deal.
So what that plays out then, right? So you were saying about how small it is, right? So that gives you a sense, and that's what it enables, right? You can go any place.
Yeah.
So this is in Buffalo, and you'll see a number of the portraits that if you were to go online on Charmaine's website, a lot of her images are identifiable really by the background of what is in the portrait. So a lot of the Buffalo portraits that you did here, for example,
It's beautiful
would have this
space.
as the backspace, right?
Yeah. Cues for the light that's coming in, it kind of doing taking notes of the backgrounds over a series of portraits, you get maybe a bit of sense. And I feel like the drawing itself is less important. What's really big is the space between me and the person that I'm painting, and the time that it's a bit of a distraction to say, oh, it's about the painting or the artwork. I feel like that's second to the connection, like the interpersonal thing. That's what.
And that's Marquise, right?
Yeah, Marquise.
He's in Golisano.
Yes, he is, yeah. I did his portrait twice, yeah.
And this is an old church, but it belongs to a community-based organization in Buffalo that's very similar to Trillium in terms of its mission and its scope.
Evergreen, yeah.
So then just sort of thinking more about how this happened. This goes back, this is not to do with the project directly, but it's to sort of reflect on where did your practice come from, right? So this is when you were in Mexico?
Yep, daily painting, like taking my little paints and just having like an amazing cocktail at this very fancy hotel kind of, and somebody's coming. Do we need to? You're gonna switch? Oh, okay. I thought that we were. Yeah, that's what I thought. Totally, it was the time for the hook. We're talking too much. Yeah, so just taking a note of the light hitting the drink, and yeah.
So this is, I think your practice evolved out of your own recording of memories, really, right? So when you were at the Gardner, right, there's a bunch of tins of your work, and they were labeled souvenirs, right?
Souvenirs, yeah, that was the book, the limited edition book that we did, which was based on, when I first went there, oh my goodness, like it blew me away. They said, would you like to come here for like a month? And when I got there, I had no idea how amazing my apartment was, and all they said was, you're just here to daydream. And I'm like, nobody's ever gave me permission. That's always something that I steal. And then so I was so grateful that I was in this wonderful oasis with all of this support, and that's not common in my life, quite the opposite. Like, it's always like, when are you gonna get your life together? Oh, you're a weirdo, or like all of these negative things. So to have this wonderful supportive environment, I did all kinds of notes. I've tried to like keep forever, because I didn't trust that it would ever come back to me, or that would be the end of it. I'd have this like, so I just cried the whole month and like painted. and then we ended up having a show out of much of those artworks and doing a book and other things.
But I think that word souvenir, right, is a reflection of sort of a little bit what this is, right?
Yeah.
It's somewhat diary, it's somewhat memory. It's a souvenir.
The little is the big to me. Like, everybody's like, why don't you paint bigger so I could put it over my sofa? And I'm like, like, put this little tiny inch by inch drawing over your sofa and have nothing else around it. So that will emphasize how beautiful and precious and tiny this is. Like, flip your thinking.
So this is the same thing with the one additional that this is a dye. So I'm English, right? So the famous redcoats, right? Redcoats are made of cochineal, which is crushed insect. So crushed beetle, I guess, and this stuff's pH sensitive. So that's me, the scientist, speaking. Right? So, but if you're Charmaine, that's lime juice, right? Like, you drop lime juice in it.
Yeah.
The color change.
Well, the guy, I went on a tour in this amazing garden, and he gave me a bug because he saw me painting all the way through the tour, and I squished it, and it was like the color of blood. And then we had tacos after, and I put the lime on it, and then it's a different shade of red. I mean, Mexican culture, like, they had figured out this beautiful red way, way, way before Western civilization had. And it was anyway, I can go on and on, just.
But the other thing, you can make your own paint, right, which is kind of fun. So you can use cochineal or something. So those making sets allow you to put your own paint in there if you want.
Yeah.
So this is, it affects all aspects of Charmaine's life, I guess, this sort of, this, so this is, this actually got delivered. And if any of you, some of you in the room I know have gotten mail from Charmaine, so you will recognize this approach to mail, a high-risk approach, but it really does arrive. Same kind of thing you see here. This is really just highlights some sort of aspects of the portraiture that Charmaine does, or at least this set of work. And so this is Zena's portrait. She too is in Don's movie. But if you want to speak to, I'm going to say one thing because I don't want you to forget. Your dad?
Oh, you mean my dad was a sign painter? Yeah, I would help him growing up, working on these big 100-foot signs, and then we'd find out that we did a typo, but just this sort of natural kind of like love of typography. I'll read about Golisano. I took typographic design in school, and yeah, so then that kind of love of play. I mean, with Zena, this portrait, I really like how it's a nice example of weaving the text in with Zena, and it's like a tapestry, really. Like, she's not, I always say this, it's not just how you look. It's in Don's documentary. It's not just how you look. It's also things that you say, you put out there, the words that we use. And then also, like, that's part of her shirt, I think, some of these colors. And since my space is very small, I'm economizing. Maybe that's trying to, like, living in New York for such a long time when you don't have much space, you're always very conscious of every little millimeter you get, kind of, yeah. Am I saying the things that you were thinking of, Steve?
Yes, I was expecting you would talk about the colours on this. And then there's a lot of self-disclosure in here. But there's a couple of other portraits that really bring that out even more. But maybe one thing to say, so this isn't in you were talking about the typographic representation here, the push-pull, because your eye is immediately drawn right to that. And then it's probably drawn to her laugh, which is a very, very distinctive laugh. It's really funny.
Yeah, it's contagious.
And then what you don't see right away, so you have to spend some time, is this part, right? So Zena became HIV positive in 1985. So that was a time when you would have expected to die, which is what she expected at the time. And she didn't. And she's lived with HIV ever since.
She's quite alive.
So this is a portrait of a different, I need to get out of the way. This one has a similar level of disclosure, different things being disclosed. So Layla is a little older than Zena. And you can see in the background, right, this one was done in Buffalo, because you see that stained glass. And Leela is sharing some quite intimate things, right? I've always been an addict. And that, what's her story with HIV? Well, her story is that, she wanted drugs, and the person who gave her HIV wanted sex.
Yeah.
So
I think she must be 70. She was 63 at the time of the portrait, and that was in 2017.
Yeah.
So, about 68 then now.
So we have a short clip, I think, on this. I'm not sure that we'll play the whole clip because it's a little long, but let's play some of it. You see that okay?
Leela? Hi. Hey, how are you?
Good.
Nice to see you.
I have to show you something.
Well, that's what I was wondering about, actually, was like, well,
Okay.
December. You had...
Yes,
You went, right?
I went.
But that's a nice one, though.
Yeah, I've got more.
Oh, my goodness, you look fantastic.
Thank you.
She's beautiful.
And she even, at Christmas time, her and her husband came over to my house.
Oh, my.
But that was the first time she'd been in my apartment. Yeah, she doesn't think she does, but it's gonna be a process for her to be able to trust me again.
Yeah.
But I've done really well. The only thing I've done is smoke a little bit of marijuana
Yeah.
for like 6 months, so.
That's kind
Yeah.
of amazing.
Oh yeah, I'm doing really good. I feel so much better.
You look fantastic.
Yeah, except for minor little things that happen naturally, no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. And you're
Yeah.
taking care of those little
Oh, yeah.
things.
Yeah, I'm a lot happier.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got your daughter back
I
in your
know.
life. And now a son-in-law.
It's gonna take a while, but
What do you mean it's going to take a while?
with her, our relationship.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot to mend or to soothe over. So, but she might come home in March.
So, and then it's also like kind of cool because now you've got this turnaround. It's like super exciting.
Yes.
I mean, I'm excited like all the time. I feel like I get to meet people doing this work, and especially I'm excited about the people when it's just turning around and then like all the great things flood your way.
yeah.
And it can almost be too much goodness or something like that. And
Yeah.
because everybody's excited about
Well,
your willingness.
sometimes I think when things are going too good for you, it's like you think, what's gonna happen?
The
You're
shoe.
just waiting for something else to tear that, happiness that you're gonna lose it for some stupid reason.
It was just a drug thing. It was a drug thing, that's
Yes.
it. I wanted drugs, he wanted sex. And yeah, I guess we were talking about
yeah.
like how it happened. What
Oh,
year
yeah.
was that? Like that was
2006.
2006.
Yeah.
Not that long ago.
No.
And so you only are you one of the people, like you can just take one pill a day
Yes.
and then you're good.
Well, except I have like blood pressure and I have like, I take about 20 pills a day with my blood pressure and thyroid and all the things that happen when you get older. But it was, just nice to just think that I might be able to help somebody else by seeing something in my portrait and the things about me. It sort of defines me a little bit more. I know I'm proud of who I am and what I've done with my HIV and with taking care of it and trying to learn as much as I can about it and help other people. And I look so much like my mother. I do. I look like her, but this with the hair and everything, I can really see my mother.
A lot of people that I meet aren't as open and fearlessly honest as you are, and I think, like, my theory is that's why things are going, because you're not lying. You're not doing the same old stuff, and how you can be like, used to be a drug addict, that's how I got HIV, traded drugs for sex, like just so open, just so matter of fact and acceptance.
Like I don't care who knows. Maybe they'll learn something from knowing or what I have to say.
So we'll show, I think there's a clip from an actual sitting, but that was actually filmed for the movie with Dawn and then edited down later, but it was a chance for Leela to reflect on the portrait in a more visible public way, which she obviously agreed to do. That often happens privately for people. They don't get the opportunity to sort of reflect on camera for obvious reasons. So I'm going to connect a bit to, we spoke about this being the experience of sort of art meeting science and what are some of the common aspects to those and what are some of the differences. So in science, we often don't talk about the process of discovery, like how do things get discovered, right? And the truth is that, you often talk about science as being about data and about facts and all of this, and sometimes you even talk about it as if it's one super smart person figuring something out, and none of that's true, right? It's a team sport. It's very messy and emotional. It's not all of this sort of, very objective stuff. Anytime you put people together in groups, emotion is always present. It's emotional if you have a discovery that somebody else says is full of shit and you're wrong, right? That's very difficult to live with. It's emotional in the sense that you can get lost. So this quote really being sort of that you can walk into the unknown, and it's better if you walk into the unknown with friends, with a group, with people you trust who have your back, who support you, who help you navigate that. But a lot of science is about that. It's walking into the unknown. And this is from Uri Alon's thing, right? So we often talk about, we imagine in science you go from A to B. Like you have an idea, you figure out the solution, and that's that. But that's not at all how it really goes. You enter this cloud of gee whiz, and you're going banging around in the dark for who knows how long, and it could be your whole career. It could be decades. It could be less. And eventually you come out with a discovery, but it's not A to B. You come out at the side with something else that wasn't what you thought you were setting out to find. So science then is very much messy and around people and around emotion, and very nonlinear, and really actually quite emotionally challenging. So one of the other things then, if you think about discovery in that sense, there's also, of course, self-discovery, right? So this is another sitter who sat with Charmaine. And in this case, we're really seeing Tim's self-discovery. I don't know if you want to...
I think, like I was talking earlier, people see how easy it is to make art. Like they just see me there sitting there painting with stuff, and it's really messy, and sometimes it comes together sometimes it doesn't. And I think Tim, after my doing his portrait, the power, I often say this, the power of authoring one's own image. It's one thing to have your portrait done, but then when you have control and say and put what you want out there, Tim's not the only one that has, tried it out. And I think also the permission to use images and words at the same time, and sort of, I think it was affirming for Tim.
Well,
Yeah.
you can kind of see, right, he was going through a pretty hard time, right? So there's all of these words that he wants to sort of put behind him. The guilt and the fear and the exhaustion. And then he's redefining himself. This is a process for him. And so all of the other positive words, right, that's part of envisioning yourself as the person that you're becoming.
When I first met Tim, he went by Woody, Snowy Owl, and I think this work also refers to his transitioning to Tim proper.
So this is, again, thinking about that process of innovation and discovery, right? So this is a quote from, you can read who the quote's from, but she's the Dean of the School of Public Health, and she says, to be a great innovator, you have to be a great observer. And this is about, it's about a Nobel Prize discovery. It's actually a pathologist, so Bruce would recognize the pathology reference, but it's a Nobel Prize for Helicobacter pylori. It's the causative agent of ulcers. So there was a pathologist and a bench scientist who worked together, and the pathologist looked at all these slides and saw bacteria there. Hundreds or thousands of other pathologists had looked at the same slides. They just never saw the bacteria because it's like, well, that's not supposed to be there, so they don't see it. But it's right there. It's like really right there. And so they made a discovery together because they actually looked at what was in front of them, really looked. And that's very true in what Charmaine does, right?
Well, I think even in talking, me and other scientists around too, seeing, I think there's a lot of exchange going on. You and I talking about this, even evolving to get me here. It was through a lot of discussion. Yeah.
So in your process, then, there's some of the steps that, this is me putting in words what I think goes on, and I've talked with Charmaine enough times that at least I know she doesn't think this is completely bullshit.
Well, also Sarah Payray too, and Stephanie Brown Clark. That's kind of the cool thing of being in this environment, is you guys have this kind of brain, and you break it down, and I'm like, oh, really? That's what's going on, is it?
So Sarah's an
nice.
educator. So Sarah she's actually the dean of the Warner School. So she'll deconstruct stuff, right? That's a little bit what educators do. How does that work? What are you really doing? And then Stephanie is the chair of our Department of Medical Humanities and Bioethics. So, for example, then, preparation, to be a scientist, you have to be prepared. Same with an artist, right? If you don't have the basic skills, it's really not going to fly. You also have to be curious with direct questions. So if you go back to that Nobel Prize thing, right? It wasn't just observation. It was, well, if that's bugs, what the heck, right? What's going on? So this is, it never fails to astonish me. It wouldn't work for me, so I should be, maybe not you. If you are Charmaine and you ask somebody, when did you last have sex? They actually answer the question. So this is a real, we were at a conference in Chicago. It was a health humanities conference, and it was probably midnight, and we were down at the bar. And it's one of those, they're turn-of-the-century hotels with these 3-foot atriums and these fantastic bar spaces, right? It's just a beautiful space. And there's a woman at the bar sitting on her own. She's probably late 50s, early 60s. And there's a story there, right? Why is somebody at the bar that time of night on their own? What's going on, right? So you get into a conversation, and then...
I don't know. the question had to be asked, like just because of things that she was saying. Like it's not like, oh hi, my name is Charmaine. When was the last time you had sex? There's some stuff that it like comes up into it, you know, like we're sitting there and chatting, and I'm picking up on like hearing things about her husband and her kid, like just, and then it just seems natural. I feel like if you want to ask a question, if you don't couch it and just say, I know you're probably not going to want to answer this question. It's probably going to make you really, if you do all of that and then ask, they're going to not answer it. So just jump in, question, like don't judge, don't prejudge your curiosity. I think at least for me, I feel like I try not to prejudge my curiosity and try not to answer things for them, like give a pure question, and that's.
So that's also this one, right? Stretching into the uncomfortable, being comfortable with silence. Oftentimes, if you're quiet and you say nothing, people want to unburden themselves, right? They answer that question because they want it. They want to say it to somebody.
She needed to.
Right. And so in science, that's a little bit about, you follow the data, you have to wait for the data to emerge. And then there's two, like if you're hoping that somebody's going to self-disclose, and it's not that you're fishing, but if you're building trust, you have to sort of meet people part way. It's not very good to sort of act, well, I've never done that, what the heck? Like, oh, that's weird,
But it's not just to build trust, it's also just like, we are all connected. We can all do really horrible things, and we can do really great things. And so, like, looking at what we have in common, this country's not really great at doing that right now. We look at quickly how we can distance ourselves from each other. And I feel like if we could just try to connect more. So I feel like that's more where I'm coming from, like, yeah, but in the end, like what you're saying happens is like a byproduct, which is cool, yeah. And
so this one, so I've known Eric for probably 25 years. And if you've ever met him, you'll notice that he has two eyes that are visibly not the same, right? There's like something different about one of his eyes. And, so I've known him like all that time, and I never once asked him. I'm like, well, that's rude, I shouldn't ask, or something, you know what I mean? Like you filter those questions, you don't ask them. But.
Well, I mean, you're looking there and you're painting, I mean, like, I feel like it's more rude to like pretend like one eye, like that they're symmetric. Like he knows what I'm seeing,
right, I'm not
because we're
saying
sitting.
It's rude, but it's just the way I filter myself, right? That wouldn't work in any way for you,
right?
Personally or professionally.
I mean, I think like I was telling you about Bell Hooks, race and representation, and she was talking about she did a talk in a small town, Midwestern town, I think, and afterwards they were going out for coffee, and so they walked into this cafe, and on the way there were these like, white dudes, and they said, she must be doing something at the university, like something about, they used the N-word. She was the only person of color, all the other people she was with were white. And none of the people that she was with acknowledged, hey Margot, I just saw you. And none of the people that she was sitting with acknowledged it, and she felt like she didn't exist. This was like a really uncomfortable thing that happened, and she had to be alone with it. And I think about that in reference to, like, just say it and just get it out of the way. And also, like, there are stories, like, I shouldn't have done it the other day in Pilates class. The woman next to me, she had a big scar coming down her face, and I was like, hey, we're just gonna, like, there wasn't enough time to really get into it, and it made her a little, so, but we're okay, it was fine.
So in this case, it's up there, but when Eric was a kid, some of his friends weren't the most intelligent, I guess, so they poked an arrow in his eye, and obviously that leads to an outcome. So this is Zena's portrait, and this Don has two cameras going here, so you can kind of see both the processes Charmaine's painting,
Oh, see, that's her shirt.
And
That's
then-
nice to
yeah,
remember.
right. So you see some of the
It's nice
colors
to
from
see
Zena's
the-
portrait from before.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that this plays properly.
It was a good thing I was talking to my mother at the time
Why?
because he gave me that diagnosis.
Right. So to have that support, somebody that loves you and could talk you down off of like fear and panic.
No, that was suicide.
1980 Right.
That was suicide. That wasn't fear and panic. That was
Yeah.
suicide. All I could see was just jumping out the window and being over with. But all I kept doing is looking at my babies.
Yeah.
You know, who was going to take care of them? My job, I had to do it.
Yeah.
So,
And she reminded you of that, maybe?
oh, she sure did. She told me when she got there, you're going to stop acting crazy. And the Lord is not going to put on you no more than what you can handle. And I'm looking at her like, what? This just gave me a death sentence. You talking about what I can handle? What more can I handle?
Yeah.
But as you can see, I handled more than what I thought I could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like mountains of luck in there too, I'd say.
Mountain of
mean-
luck, I think a mountain of prayer, a mountain of faith, a mountain of hope, all that is a mountain of.
So again, it gives you a sense, like also I think of the scale, right? And the, like this is in a relatively public space at the Med Center, but there's somebody who's off camera who keeps people away, so that conversation stays kind of in a bubble, stays intimate. And so these are two portraits of the same individual that we're going to show in a sec. So this is Gisele's first portrait. Gisele is a trans woman, and in this first portrait, she's really talking about some of her experiences, right? So this is, you know, Gisele's life has not been easy. And she's done a lot of work with really her community to improve things for others and to work around, you know, HIV prevention and sexual health. What you'll see on this portrait, and this is a spoiler alert in a way, she doesn't mention HIV.
I think I inserted it though on the phone because I wanted to put it on the banner. I was like, oh, we didn't even talk about HIV. So I think I called her up. Oh yeah. So this is,
Yeah, okay.
that's
right.
that was an afterthought after that
You're
I
right.
did
And
on the
what she
phone.
sa- but what she
that's
says
it.
is, I know at least 5 people who have HIV. There's nothing personal.
Right.
Right.
She
Nothing
doesn't
directly
disclose.
personal.
Yeah.
So this was the first portrait. Is there anything else I'm forgetting on this one?
No, that's good. Probably.
So second portrait, generally most people just sit once. And maybe just to say, like, just out of interest, hands, show hands, how many of you have ever sat for a portrait in your life? Like, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Her hand should go up.
Oh yeah. People get back at me. You should see some of the things that they do. Revenge portraits.
But the point is, most of us have never sat for a portrait, right? So the experience of sitting for a portrait and having somebody really look closely at you, that's very, very rare. And then that second part of really listening closely to you and writing down the stuff, that's super rare. Like, you know, I pay to go to see a shrink for that stuff, but, you know, that otherwise that's not part of my day-to-day. So that's very rare. So I'm saying that to sort of preface, this is the first portrait that Gisele sat for. She sat for a second portrait, and you can see some of what's different, right? So this time, Gisele speaks about her own diagnosis.
I love this sentence, but this is supposed to be what? What makes you think? If I don't care what my mama thinks, what makes you think I care what you think?
And then this, you know, this sort of self-definition, just much more open and able to sort of accept and really almost, in speaking about that, right, this is part of what it means to destigmatize, right? What's she got to be ashamed of? She doesn't have anything to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
So speak about it, if you know, if you're comfortable with that. So for her, I think that was healing.
I think think it also too, Steve, was like in hindsight now, like she was one of the first portraits I did when I entered the HIV community. Everybody's like, who, what, you know, who's, I think maybe, so it's not just trust between she and I and where she is in her life with, which I know, you know, being out on so many levels, but it's also seeing, because it was a year later almost when this second one, and I know that after I do a portrait, I know that tension can be high because they don't know what was included and they might think, oh, that thing that I said, you know, and it's a new process. People don't do portraits that include their words. So but then as time passes, the comfort levels with what transpired, you know, you forget. And then you're able to divorce the portrait sitting, which is quite different from the actual portrait. Like Steve was saying, not everything that happens and is shared, and I make quick decisions. Some things, nah, you know, I don't include, and something, you know, so it can be intense until they get to see their portrait.
Right, and what you don't get to do is to say, oh, I need you to take that out, right?
Yeah,
Or I need you to
no.
put that in. It's like, no, that's not how it's
You're not the boss. It's kind of,
You're not the boss.
because it's my portrait. It's like how I see you, and that's when you do your own portrait, you author your own image, then it's a self-portrait, and then it's a different, and that's why it's kind of nice to have your portrait done, like seeing yourself in other people's eyes. Like when Dawn does these documentaries, oh my God, like it's really difficult to see what happens. It's good though. Thank you.
What she means is it's difficult for you to look at yourself.
Yeah.
specifically, right?
When it's turned, the tables, yeah.
So, and then moving beyond your comfort zone, right? Again, that's part of the creative process, no matter what your creative process is. So, as I sort of alluded to earlier, for many people who really make discoveries in science, it's very lonely, right? You discover something. We have a guy at the university right now in the physics department, and his field is superconductivity, which is, it's a transitional state of material where it is a very efficient conductor of electricity. And the finding he has is so novel that there are several people in the field who are aggressively attacking him publicly. And that, to an extent, that's part of the scientific process within certain parameters. But in this case, it's actually gone a little further than that. And so that experience is a really difficult experience for him. And he sort of just has to get through that to where his findings become broadly accepted. And then people say, well, we knew that all the time. Well, no, the experience of being the pioneer is a very hard experience. Mm-hmm. So we talked for a second also about getting outside of your comfort zone. So self-portraiture.
I mean, if I'm trying to make it fit with the other things that I do with other people, it's like Steve, when I'm doing my own portrait, like, I'm gonna, make myself look good, make myself look smart, you know, like do all of those insecurities. I don't have help with it, kind of thing. So, in some ways, yeah, this one is kind of. That was me trying to do a self-portrait that fit.
A few others
Yeah.
since. So one of them, I can't remember if it's in.
I mean, I've done lots of
Oh, it is,
self-portraits, but with words.
So
Yeah, this one with my friend Sarah V. Press, who I met at that conference. So we did it over Zoom during COVID, and it's not flattering at all. But she was the one that was leading it, asking the questions, and then she was telling me what to write down and telling me even how. And so and you can, like the color coding, like, yeah, there's some color coding at which, like this is a note for me when I go back into it and I look at it, it really brings up the conversation that we had. It was like such a brilliant, she's really, yeah. So it's different. So this is my way to do a self-portrait, is if there's somebody that I connect with and I like to talk with, like, and if they feel like it, then that could be a good way to do, you know what I mean? Ah, these, shit. I don't do black and white. I don't see in black and white, I only see in color, and so New Year's Eve with drinks, that could be an excuse for like how shitty it is too, but just like trying to do line drawings and trying, like this is the sort of thing you should not show, Steve, like it should not
So
be
a
in
couple
the...
of things, right? These are much larger scale, and these are
Just-
brushes on rice paper, right?
Yeah, it's but it's just like wanting to stretch myself, that's the point, is like, you know, but normally when you do bad drawings, like you don't go and show them to everybody, you
especially
hide
maybe
them
not at
and
an art
destroy
museum,
them,
right?
yeah.
So
Not
that
with
said,
people.
you know, even more offensive, right? This would be, this is me where it was a friend's birthday, so, and I've had instruction about close observation, right? So if you ever look at a candle flame, it doesn't look exactly like that. So maybe I'll just leave it at that. But this is not something I would have done previously. And then this is a...
This is him getting back at me for, this is one of those revenge portraits. That's supposed to be me there. He didn't even do my face. That's my ugly sweater in the cemetery. And when people don't keep their dogs, it's a cemetery. Respect for the place that you're in. And I guess...
There wasn't sufficient respect being shown, so as you can see, there was... And these were actually things that were shared.
To his horror and an acute embarrassment. I mean, yeah. Anyway, next slide.
So, in conclusion, this is a quote from Chris Byra, who we shared a lot of this work with early on. So Chris is, he's the Desmond Tutu Professor of Public Health and Human Rights at Johns Hopkins, and he was also the president of the International AIDS Society. So I'm always hesitant whether I should read the thing or just let you read it for yourselves, but maybe just let you read it for yourself.
You've got the good voice, though. Like, you've got that British accent. So it's like you're the voiceover voice. Like, it's nice to hear it, I think.
Fine. Okay, a good portrait is a window, a portal out of which a person emerges. Someone for whom empathy can no longer be denied once we have seen something of their humanity. And so that was Chris's reaction to this project, and I think that's a very
Nice.
appropriate response. And I believe that is our last slide, except for the thank yous. So.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here.
I guess I'm coming back up.
Well, this is where, I mean, if you have questions or anything, this is a good time to, we have time. Yeah.
So I noticed in the top right corner of almost all your portraits, there's just little dots of color. Is that all the colors that you used?
Hey, artist. That's like me testing out if this is the right. I'm really into trying to match and mix the color that I'm seeing, and so I test it out in the corner. Yeah. Is that what you do too?
I haven't painted in a long time, but I used to. At least on a separate piece of paper.
Yeah, most people don't do it right on the real thing. Yeah. I don't have space or time.
So as another artist, I want to say I appreciate you showing your fail pictures because, I actually do line art, drawing, black and white, and I would like to do color and painting, but I'm afraid of it looking bad. And I think it's important for people to know that it's okay for it to look bad at first. Like, it's a process. So thank you for sharing that.
I suppose there's that. Yeah. Thank you.
How many total portraits did you do in the whole project? And what was the time span?
So about 6 or 7 months, loosely. We tried to keep it to 6 or 7 months for the HIV community, and I did at least 80 portraits, I'd say. Before that, about 6 months for the mental health program, and I did almost maybe 120. And I still am finishing some confession because it's like I'm into the moment and sitting with it, but then I also like going into my studio and then reflecting on things that people have shared, maybe Googling that song or checking out that book or podcast, or just maybe like, so, and then I finish up some of the typography or give some shape to it. So there, I do have confession before I die. I have to finish all these other ones. And then with the OUD segment, that was a different, it was like a federal grant agency, and with the opiate use disorder, the hardest hit areas are basically like the Bible Belt, rural areas, and Steuben and Allegheny. So it means a lot of travel and a lot of booking. So getting to go to not your own neighborhood requires a whole lot more work to build trust with the community that's quite vulnerable from an outsider. Like, you're going down south and like, oh, I'm from New York, like, trust me. No, like, it's so it depends on, and then I've had the opportunity to do some work over in Buffalo as well, refugee community, homeless population, marginalized people who I relate to them very, very much. So thank you for asking.
Was there any process, like, in your mind about, like, how you chose the quotes for, like, each of the, like, portraits, or was it kind of just, like, a spur of the moment, they said something that just, like, caught your ear and you wrote it down, or was there, like, a lot more intentionality behind it?
It's mostly very just like, that's interesting, I haven't heard somebody say that before, and I'm like, oh, I want to make a note of that, or that it's funny, or just, but I will say that sometimes when people share, and I read their body language and the way that they're saying it, and I can tell it's not really going to serve them or this portrait or anything if we include something that's just more difficult maybe or something. So I do make quick decisions like that. Yeah. So, and of course, like in the course of an hour, there's not enough room on a piece of paper. So they can take comfort in that. Like, you were going to say.
Yeah, okay, so you say to ask her a question, so I'm going to ask her
Yes.
a question. You said that you relate to these marginalized communities very heavily. Why is that?
Oh, okay, should I sit down? Do we have time? No, I mean, like my own personal experience, like we were extremely poor. I was raised in a very cult, Jehovah's Witness, like cut off from, there was a lot of discipline and there was a lot of reading the Bible and a lot of mess. And so that being my formative experience, years of it. So I can, I haven't had the good fortune of like, you can do it, like, you're awesome. Like, no, it's more like, you're not allowed to wear that. You're not allowed to make decisions for yourself. You're not allowed, so no support.
Thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you for asking and listening. What's that? Sorry? What?
Sorry that happened to you.
Oh, that's kind, thank you. I mean, but I'm not other people. Everybody has their thing, so I'm not saying it to, just, yeah. It's not always once you spend time with people, there's always more.
I think we have a question.
How did you recruit your sitters? How did you find people?
Well, this, Kathy Bunce and Steve and people in the communities that I work with, they, like when I'm working in the mental health community, there might be somebody who it really isn't the right time maybe to have a portrait done, that it's really not. So their trusted people don't suggest it, or we don't. But then there are other people, they're at different stages of their life, and it's just the thing. And so I rely heavily upon, before that, it was just like, you know, hanging out in a bar and like doing drawings or wherever I was, and then, you know, at the museum, they have like, you know, people would sign up, like when I'm coming to town, then there's like a calendar. And so I remember there's this one woman she wanted to have her portrait done the first time that I was there, but she hemmed and hawed, and then everything was filled up, and she didn't. So the next time when I was back in town, she was like right on it, but I could see it was something she was doing for herself, like she could not make eye contact. I've never met somebody who just could not make eye contact. And then even just very interesting in talking with her, learning how that, you know, being able to talk with somebody was just very, how it informed her whole life experience. So it was that was cool, yeah. I don't know, does that answer? Kind of. Yes.
What happens to the portraits after you finish them?
They stay in a box or they go in a frame. Sometimes, like Xena, Don, and, well, actually I think Don bought it for his partner, his betrothed, Jennifer. They have it in a frame at their house. So, yeah, that's it. But I do have a lot of, but then, oh yeah, actually that's another really good question, is because we do installations where I scan them at a very high resolution, and then we can print them on like 13-foot banners and in public places, and then there's context, so there's that whole other, we didn't even talk about that,
shop,
yeah.
right?
And there's the gift shop, yeah.
So that's an example of where you might have one as an installation. If some of you work at the Med Center, you'll see there are banners in the atrium of the Med Center. That's not this portrait series, but it's representations of people from...
They're HIV portraits, yeah.
Well, or Harvest, right? So, right, so it's representations of different marginalized communities within that space.
But here, they're the portraits that we did within, here at the, but that's a great, there's writing that goes on about it, and there's a whole thing. I just did one of my favorite installations is at the drug court in Hindman, Kentucky, and they had barren walls, and there are 4 people that, you know, were really miserable lives, and now they're in recovery. Yeah, so they're up as success stories. Maybe we can do one. I feel like, are we talking too much? Hat, mask.
I'm not sure if I missed it. Like I get you go to different places. So like if you're at the mental health community, you'd be like, tell me about your mental health. Like, what do you do to prompt a conversation? Do you ask them to start? Your work reminds me a lot of that guy Brandon that runs Humans of New York. Like, and they're just like a very random conversation. They're so like poignant. They're so like. You know?
Humans of New York. No, my friend said that, but I was like the old school paper and paint, and he does the photographs and then writes up a thing. It's also, he's where I used to be, just like everybody's interesting, and everybody is, but these days I've been working under umbrellas, like if you identify with this community, and so especially like the destigmatizing thing, it's like, so just even sitting with me, even if you don't talk about if you have a diagnosis or not, if it's the mental health community, or just being identified with, and then also what's cool is you don't know if it's somebody with a diagnosis or a doctor or a family member who cares about you and is impacted by what's going on. So it just makes us all the same, and you can't tell what's going on for somebody unless you stop and take the time to find out, kind of thing. So how foolish the judging and the stigma thing really is, and the work that we need to do constantly as individuals to, like all of us, to not, so, and Yeah, did that do an okay job?
Yeah. It was
Kind of. Thanks. Now, yes.
Please join me in
Right.
thanking Charmaine.
Sorry.